Last year, I made a video in which I explained what I believe to be the best viewing order to watch the Disney Plus Mandoverse shows in. And in that video, I also said that I think that the Mandoverse projects would work much better if all the different shows were just one series which focused on several characters but one central plot. A bit like Game of Thrones or something, where each character has their own storyline that is individual to that character, but are ultimately all part of the larger story. See, one of the main complaints about the Mandoverse that I see a lot online is the issue of characters hijacking each other's shows. The Mandalorian Season 2 had Bo-Katan, Ahsoka Tano, Boba Fett and Luke Skywalker all show up in just 8 episodes. Then there was a post-credit scene teasing a spin-off show for Boba Fett himself, and that show was even worse, with 2 episodes out of the 7-episode season not even featuring Boba, and instead focusing on the Mandalorian, Ahsoka, Luke Skywalker and Mando's reunion with Grogu, which completely undermined the finale of Mando Season 2 and left very little room for the story to grow in Season 3, but nevertheless, the Mandoverse is still my personal favourite thing to come from Disney Star Wars, although Andor and Rogue One are a close second, and the Jedi games are definitely up there too. But naturally, that means I have spent quite a bit of time trying to find the easiest solution to those issues I just mentioned. I personally think it's great that we see these characters crossing into each other's shows because it helps create a sense of continuity between them, but I do understand that when you have a show called The Book of Boba Fett, you expect it to be about Boba Fett. I've seen some great rewrites and fan edits online that either turn entire seasons into a movie, reorder the episodes, or just rewrite the show altogether, but I wanted to find a way to improve on the storytelling and continuity of the shows without needing to change the shows themselves. And so I came up with the viewing order that I broke down in that previous video. However, here we are in 2025 and the Mandoverse has a new addition to the timeline, Skeleton Crew. And so in this video, I'm going to update that viewing order for you all, explaining why I chose to put the episodes in this order, and how I think it benefits the story of the Mandoverse without changing the core of the series itself. Be warned, there will be major spoilers for The Mandalorian Seasons 1, 2 and 3, as well as the Book of Boba Fett Season 1, Ahsoka Season 1 and Skeleton Crew Season 1 in this video. If you have never watched any of these shows and would like to avoid spoilers, then the episode order is on screen now. You can either screenshot it or write it down for yourself, and trust me when I say this is a much better way to watch the Mandoverse than the official release order. Anyway, without further ado, here is my updated and revised viewing order for Star Wars The Mandalorian.
Through the Force, you will find balance as well.
The Mandoverse begins in the year 9 ABY, which means 9 years after the Battle of Yavin, when the Rebels destroyed the first Death Star, or approximately 4 to 5 years following the defeat of the Empire and the rise of the New Republic in Return of the Jedi. For the sake of maintaining continuity and constructing a unified storyline, I have divided this timeline into 2 phases, where Phase 1 begins with the entire first season of Skeleton Crew, followed by The Mandalorian Seasons 1 and 2, which means Chapter 1 all the way through to Chapter 16. Phase 2 is a bit more muddled, and I believe that Phase 3 will likely include the upcoming Mandalorian and Grogu movie scheduled for release next year in 2026, as well as Ahsoka Season 2. And now for those of you who are interested to know why I chose this order and why I think it works better than the official release order, then let me break it down for you now. So, although Skeleton Crew has just come out and officially it's supposed to take place after everything else we've seen so far, I think it actually works much better to open the Mandoverse with it. By starting with Skeleton Crew as the first Star Wars story to follow the original trilogy, we are continuing that same family-friendly, light-hearted action-adventure charm of Return of the Jedi. Skeleton Crew definitely has those familiar elements of 80s adventure films like The Goonies or E.T., and so I think thematically, it's a fitting story to pick up with after the original trilogy. Now, the story of Skeleton Crew doesn't have too much to do with the wider Mandoverse time period, but the main reason I've placed it first to open Phase 1 is because Skeleton Crew opens with a title crawl that reads, "Since the fall of the Empire, the New Republic has maintained order. And yet, remote hyperspace lanes are increasingly plagued by piracy." This title crawl not only tells us what we need to know for the series itself, but by following Return of the Jedi with this, we are establishing the context for the setting of this next time period within the Star Wars universe. Although the Empire has fallen, the New Republic is struggling to maintain law and order throughout the galaxy. This is the perfect way to open the Mandoverse, because it not only establishes what we see in The Mandalorian Seasons 1 and 2, where the outer rim of the galaxy has become this lawless Wild West where people like Mando must turn to bounty hunting and mercenary work to survive, but it also right away establishes that the New Republic cannot control the outer rim, which we see as the Mandoverse goes on, how this eventually leads to remnant cells of the Empire growing stronger and eventually allowing Grand Admiral Thrawn to return and reunite these scattered Imperial remnants. Now, after Skeleton Crew, we watched The Mandalorian Season 1 and Season 2, and after the Season 2 finale, when Luke Skywalker arrives to rescue Grogu, and we see the post-credit scene to tease Boba Fett's spin-off, instead of picking up right away with the Book of Boba Fett, which instantly rushes into reuniting Mando and Grogu only a few episodes after their emotional departure, instead we open Phase 2 with Ahsoka Part 1. Now the reason for this is that Ahsoka Part 1 also opens with a title crawl, the same as Skeleton Crew Episode 1. So just like how all the main movies in the Star Wars saga open with their iconic title crawls, the different phases of the Mandoverse will also open with a title crawl, and the difference between the title crawl in Skeleton Crew and the title crawl in Ahsoka shows how much more serious the story has become since that light-hearted opening. And of course, I think the Mandalorian and Grogu movie will likely also open with its own title crawl, which will be the beginning of Phase 3. Now, another reason for watching Ahsoka before the Book of Boba Fett is that although the official timeline order says that Ahsoka shouldn't be watched until after the Book of Boba Fett and Mandalorian Season 3, watching it that way creates a huge plot hole. Ahsoka appears in The Mandalorian Chapter 13 when she captures Morgan Elsbeth and demands to know where Thrawn is. So by waiting another 2 seasons to continue that storyline, we are not only interrupting the flow of Ahsoka's story and the urgency of finding Thrawn, but it means that according to the canon, Morgan Elsbeth was in transit to prison for anywhere from a few months to up to 2 years after Ahsoka captured her, which is just stupid. In other words, if you watch the episodes as they are on Disney+, then there are 18 episodes between Chapter 13 of The Mandalorian when Ahsoka arrests Morgan Elsbeth and Part 1 of Ahsoka when Morgan Elsbeth escapes custody on her way to prison, during which Mando and Grogu are separated and reunited after Grogu becomes a Jedi for a short time and Mando goes back to bounty hunting. Boba Fett becomes a crime lord and goes to war with the Pike Syndicate. Moff Gideon is captured and escapes, building a network of spies within the New Republic, only for the Mandalorians to set aside their differences and reclaim their home planet from the Empire. All within the same length of time that Morgan Elsbeth was supposed to be on her way to prison. Phase 2 opens as Phase 1 ended, and now Morgan Elsbeth escapes only 4 episodes after she is captured, rather than 2 seasons, which turns Chapter 13 of The Mandalorian into a much more important story beat, rather than the kind of cheap throwaway tease at the Ahsoka series that it would be if you were to watch Ahsoka after The Mandalorian Season 3. So Phase 2 alternates between Ahsoka and the Book of Boba Fett, which gives the plot of both series time to breathe and allows tension to build in both. When The Mandalorian returns in Chapters 5 and 6 of the Book of Boba Fett, it no longer feels so rushed because we've had those extra few episodes of Ahsoka to space out his return a little bit more. And it doesn't feel like he's intruding on Boba Fett's series either, if we consider all these episodes to be part of just one series. Now, when Ahsoka appears in the Book of Boba Fett Chapter 6, despite her last appearance at the end of Part 2 in her own series, showing her blasting off into hyperspace with Sabine to find and bring back Ezra, but there is one clever way that we can explain this that actually enhances her appearance in Chapter 6 and provides more meaning for her appearance rather than, yet again, just a cheap cameo. When she leaves Luke towards the end of that episode, he asks if he will ever see her again, to which she only responds with,
"Perhaps. May the Force be with you."
Her reason for being here, according to the headcanon that we have to create ourselves, is that she came to either ask Luke for help on her mission to stop Thrawn, or simply to let him know that she will be out of reach for some time while she searches for Ezra. When we pick up with Ahsoka again in part 3, the episode opens with Ahsoka walking into her ship from the cockpit after blasting off into hyperspace again. To our version of this timeline, this means that we are picking up with Ahsoka right after she has left Luke, while Sabine stayed with the ship the whole time to train with Hu Yang. Okay, then we finish the Book of Boba Fett with the underwhelming finale, and Grogu is reunited with Mando after choosing his personal attachment over the Jedi way. After that, we continue with Ahsoka part 4 and 5. And what's nice here is that Ahsoka gets to meet Anakin again, only 2 episodes after she spoke to his son Luke. Now here's my favourite detail from this whole viewing order. Ahsoka part 5 ends on a very dramatic finale with Ahsoka and Hu Yang communicating with the Purrgil to bring them to Peridia. The next episode in our viewing order is The Mandalorian Season 3 premiere, episode 17, in which right around the start of the episode we see Mando and Grogu cruising through hyperspace in Mando's flash new Naboo starfighter. Grogu looks out of his little window as he senses a school of Purrgil cruising alongside them. Now to me, when I first watched the episodes in this order, I instantly thought that Grogu was not sensing the Purrgils themselves here, but could in fact sense that Ahsoka was inside that very Purrgil. This is just one of those minor details that when recontextualized like this means a whole lot more and really helps bind the story together. As for The Mandalorian Season 3, we watched several episodes at a time while watching the last 3 episodes of Ahsoka in between. One of the key story points that continues to bind these shows together is the repeated appearance of the New Republic Ranger Carson Teva, who appears in The Mandalorian, The Book of Boba Fett and Ahsoka, in which he leads the investigation into the activities of the Imperial Remnant.
There's something going on out here. They don't believe it on the core worlds, but it's true. These aren't isolated incidents. They need to be stopped before it's too late.
That ship showed up on a transponder log back in Navarro in an incident involving Imperial remnants. I'm just connecting some dots here.
I don't think that this is an isolated episode. Navarro has reported accounts of stormtroopers in the streets and TIE fighters openly flying above. The citizens speak of Moff Gideon occupying the town, and now a pirate king is attempting the same thing? These events could all be connected.
Imperial remnant. There is no proof of any coordination between the scattered and dwindling number of Imperial forces.
What about the conflict on Mandalore?
Gideon was a warlord acting on his own. There is no proof of a greater conspiracy and thus no immediate threat to this republic.
If Thrawn returns, that will change quickly.
And what's great is that watching the episodes in this order, Carson Teva's story, yet again, it's just one of those small things that gets brought to the forefront, whereas watching it in the official release order, he's just this character who keeps appearing and he keeps mentioning the Imperial Remnant. But in this viewing order, he's almost like a main part of the story. He's the character who's leading the investigation into the Empire and makes the threat of Thrawn's return feel so much more real and impending. The Mandalorian Season 3 also features the pirate Vane, who we saw all the way back in Skeleton Crew, or just recently in Skeleton Crew. Although officially this is meant to be his first appearance in Mandalorian Season 3, and then he supposedly fled to join Captain Silvo's crew after the defeat of Gorian Shard on Navarro.
Been a pleasure serving you, Captain.
But it's time to part ways.
In our viewing order, it's the opposite way around. Instead, his first appearance is in Skeleton Crew, and there's nothing in Skeleton Crew to say that it couldn't be that he fled Captain Silvo's crew after they were defeated on Attin, and later joined up with Gorian Shard instead. When I was watching the Skeleton Crew finale, I was keeping a close eye out for Vane, and I was trying to see if there were any points that he died or got captured, but luckily there weren't, so this viewing order still makes perfect sense. Finally, we conclude Phase 2 of the Mandoverse with a 4-part finale, which consists of The Mandalorian Chapter 23, then Ahsoka Part 7, then The Mandalorian Finale Chapter 24, and then finally Ahsoka Season 1 Finale Part 8. Alternating from The Mandalorian to Ahsoka and then back as both seasons reach their climax also really helps build the tension of both storylines. And there are some nice thematic parallels in there too. For example, we see in The Mandalorian Chapter 23 how the Imperial Shadow Council are meeting to discuss the possibility of Thrawn's return.
Grand Admiral Thrawn's return will herald in the re-emergence of our military.
Which is paralleled by the very next episode, Ahsoka Part 7, in which the New Republic Senate are debating the same thing, as well as the conflict on Mandalore, which has just begun at the end of the previous episode.
How real is the threat of Thrawn's return?
We have to prepare for the worst. And hope for the best.
When the Mandalorians retake their home planet in Chapter 24, and Mando begins working for the New Republic to hunt down Imperial warlords, that is then followed by the perfect setup for the Mandalorian movie, when Thrawn returns to the galaxy in the very next episode, Ahsoka Part 8. And then of course we have the big teasers of the finale, with Baylan Skoll looking out over the mountains on Peridia toward a mysterious light in the distance, while he stands on the ruined statues of the Mortis Trinity, which leaves some very interesting mysteries to explore in Ahsoka Season 2, which I'm presuming is going to take place after the Mandalorian and Grogu movie. So, just to recap again, Phase 1 of the Mandoverse begins with Skeleton Crew Season 1, The Mandalorian Season 1, and The Mandalorian Season 2. Phase 2 begins with Ahsoka Part 1, followed by The Book of Boba Fett Chapters 1 and 2, Ahsoka Part 2, The Book of Boba Fett Chapters 3, 4, 5, and 6, Ahsoka Part 3, The Book of Boba Fett Chapter 7, Ahsoka Part 4 and Part 5, The Mandalorian Chapters 17, 18, and 19, Ahsoka Part 6, The Mandalorian Chapter 20, 21, 22, and 23, Ahsoka Part 7, The Mandalorian Chapter 24, and Ahsoka Part 8. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. For those of you who saw my video from last year, I know this was a little bit of a rehash, but for those of you who didn't, then you have now heard my headcanon viewing order for The Mandalorian, and why I believe those shows work much better as just one series. I would definitely recommend trying this viewing order out for yourself. I've personally rewatched the shows in this order twice now, and it honestly just works so much better than watching them in the official release order. The story feels like it actually has some continuity to it, and that it's building towards something big, which I will be going over my theory on what that is in my next video. Stay tuned for more Star Wars lore videos, and later this year, and going into next year, I will be switching gears on this channel as I unveil a very special project I've been working on. It will have a different focus than these lore videos, but I think it's something that a lot of people will enjoy. Thank you so much for watching, and may the Force be with you all.